Emerald ash borer, or EAB for short, is an invasive pest that has created an environmental crisis in St. Paul for the past 2 decades. Since EAB was first discovered in St. Paul in 2009, our professional forestry staff have been executing a management plan that focuses on the removal and replacement of public ash trees. Our staff know as well as anyone the impact that losing trees has on individuals and neighborhoods across the city. But we have reached a critical phase in the infestation. Dead and declining infested ash trees quickly dry out and become brittle, are prone to failures such as dropping limbs, and pose an increasing public safety risk. By removing these trees from the landscape, we can then work to restore the urban forest by planting a more diverse combination of species where they once stood. The City of St. Paul has chosen not to embark on a long-term treatment program for public ash trees, but individual property owners can find more information on potential treatment options for individual trees on our website. It is important to understand, however, that the vast majority of the ash trees in St. Paul are not considered viable for treatment. For more information about EAB and options property owners have to address trees on their property, please visit stpaul.gov/EAB.
Bernie Bear here to talk to you about carbon monoxide and carbon monoxide alarms. Carbon monoxide is a gas that's colorless, tasteless, odorless, and deadly. To protect yourself and your loved ones, you should have a carbon monoxide alarm on every level of your home and within 10 feet of each sleeping area. Remember to test the carbon monoxide alarms monthly and replace the battery yearly. Replace your alarm before you hear the end-of-life alert. If the alarm makes a continuous loud noise, get everyone outside and call 911. Carbon monoxide alarms protect the ones you love. Make sure they are working today. See you next time. This is Bernie Bear coming to you today from the Firehouse Kitchen. Did you know that cooking is the leading cause of fires? To prevent cooking fires, remember these 3 rules. Keep anything that can burn 3 feet away from the stove. Do not leave the kitchen when you are cooking. Stay and look when you cook. If you have a fire on your stove, cover the fire with the lid or a big
City Council to order. Roll call.
Naker,
Here.
Prince,
Here.
Tao.
Here.
Tolbert.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Council President Brenmon.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 5 through 20 are before you for your consideration.
And is there anything on our consent agenda that should be taken separately? All right, hearing none. Mr. Tao moves the consent agenda. Any discussion? Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao. Councilmember Tao, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted.
Mr. Tolbert moves suspension of the rules. Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. Rules are suspended. Resolution 21-1181, recommending that the City of St. Paul explore vaccination requirement for all employees.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, thank you, Council President and colleagues for suspending the rules. I just want to start by saying I'm bringing this under suspension because I think there is a sense of urgency to getting started on this work and for the city to start exploring what a vaccination requirement looks like for our employees. I will also be asking that we lay this over for 1 week, just so that folks have time to react to it since we did bring it under suspension. But I think putting this on today, giving people notice and with the intent to pass it next week, I think is very good way to do it. And that's what I'm doing. In many ways, the resolution speaks for itself. It is to ensure that our employees in the city of St. Paul are fully vaccinated, or if because of a religious exemption or something else, there's alternatives to consistent testing and things like that. But long story short, we have a very safe, effective, and free vaccine available to all people, all city employees, all people who live in the city of St. Paul, and all people over the age of 12 in the state of Minnesota. And we have a duty both to our employees who work in the city and would work along people who are unvaccinated, but also more to the young people under the 12 and under who don't have the ability right now to get vaccinated, to make sure that our staff who are interacting oftentimes in very close personal and up close ways with young people, we should ensure that our staff are vaccinated so that they're fully protecting people to the best of our ability. And I think that's just part of being responsible society and responsible government. And I think it's something that's really important to do, and especially with the major spreading of this Delta variant that is led mostly by unvaccinated individuals. I think it's time that we start ensuring that we, at the City of St. Paul, lead by example and have vaccinated employees. I know Ramsey County started this process yesterday. The state of Minnesota, I understand, announced it earlier today. States across the country, I believe Hawaii has also done it. Virginia is looking at it, and other municipalities are looking at it. I think all municipalities should look at this. And I will also say the resolution does call out that we encourage the St. Paul Public Schools to look at a policy for this too. I think I hear it from my community quite often about the nervousness of this Delta variant and the reopening of schools in less than a month, and ensuring that at least the people who qualify to get vaccinated now are vaccinated. And I know it was at least discussed at the school board meeting earlier this week by some of the school board members, but I think us encouraging them to do it, as well as the city of St. Paul implementing that policy come September, when I think more of our workforce will be returning to work, and also allows ample time for anyone who has chosen not to get vaccinated yet to get vaccinated. It's time, and if we want to have our society return to some sense of normalcy and be safe, it's going to require people to take this safe, effective, and free vaccine that is available and working. So I would ask for my colleagues' support on this, and then I eventually will make a motion to lay it over to next week.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tolbert. So the intent is to read this into the record today. And I appreciate the work to get this into the Legistar system today. As you mentioned, it's very timely with other entities, the Ramsey County and state of Minnesota around us offering similar. So thank you for that. And I will support the resolution and your request for the 1 week layover. Ms. Jalali, then Mr. Tao.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer my appreciation to Councilmember Tolbert for raising this. And the only thing I would add is I saw a news item today that said that over 90% of new cases in Minnesota are Delta variant. And so we just are getting every single day information that underscores how urgent this is and that this problem is solvable and the government can act to institute that change. So thank you for bringing it. And I just appreciate the work on it.
Thank you. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Tolbert, for bringing this forward. I am glad that we do have, that this is a research phase or where we look into it, because I do want to respect that, people might have different practice, religious or whatever. And so I think that we should, as we go forward, let's be respectful of that. But I am supportive of it. Personal testimony. I got my first Pfizer shot, and then after that, I contracted the COVID-19, and I think it made a huge difference. I didn't get it before, but I just listening to other folks who didn't get vaccinated with the first shot, they had a different experience, a much more challenging experience, and so I would encourage folks who haven't had it to go and get vaccinated, because I believe that it does help.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Ms. Yang.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you, Councilmember Tolbert, for putting this forward as well. I am really supportive of it. I've already signed on as a co-sponsor and feel like this is a really important step to take, because we also need to model to other governmental bodies that they can do this too, that they have permission to do this. And I know that, sometimes what we hear in our government and politics is that it's hard to be like that first one, making that first step, but this is important to save people's lives. And our St. Paul employees are the ones who are out there working on the grounds with folks who live in our city too. And so they also play a key role in this. And I know that we are not yet at 100% of vaccination rates for our City of St. Paul employees. We have a lot to do to get there, and really hoping that folks will work together so that we can achieve that.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Any other comments? If not, we'll take Mr. Tolbert's motion to lay this matter over for 1 week. All right. Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to August 18th. Item 21 is the first reading of ordinance 21-32, adopting an emergency ordinance schedule for penalties for non-compliance of outdoor watering restrictions.
And on this item, I believe Director Shea and is here from St. Paul Regional Water Services. I'm not sure who is presenting. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Good afternoon, Council President Brenmo and members of the council. Thank you very much for your time today. I know 3 of the 7 have heard this coming forward several times, and my understanding from the introduction that there's a discussion this morning on it. So we will do our best to be brief, but hopefully we will have what you need to kind of base your decisions on. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Still?
Now it's a picture of somebody.
Okay, that would be my daughter looking really excited. So I did not. All right, here we go. Better?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm joined today by Raquel Vasky, the Assistant General Manager. She will go through more of the statistics and the background of where we are and where we proceeded from July 20th when the drought was implemented. So tonight's action or this afternoon's actions are really based upon both the water code and the city code and making sure we conform with the requirements that relate to implementing watering restrictions. So it is a board authorized activity that they can grant in short increments during drought. So it's not something administratively that I, as the general manager or staff, can do. So that's the purpose of tonight and why it's coming before you as an emergency ordinance. So I will turn it over to Raquel to speak, to introduce herself,
Great.
and then provide the next few slides. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Council President Brenmo and council members for having us here today to talk about the drought and where we've been and where we might be going. This first slide really outlines the state drought plan, which Pat mentioned here for us, and really gives us our guidance on what our requirements are to continue to meet the requirements of our permit of pulling water from the Mississippi River. So as you can see, we are currently in the drought warning phase. This started on July 20th as a result of the river being under 2,000 cubic feet per second for 5 days in a row. So on the 20th, due to entering that drought warning phase, is when you saw St. Paul Water put out a request really to our customers to try and begin following an odd-even watering schedule. And that is really because the requirement within the drought warning phase is that we get down to about 50% of what 50% above what we use in January. So as you can imagine, water use is at its lowest point in January, and the goal is to be 50% above that, which brings us to a goal of getting to about 53 million gallons per day. What might come next is a restrictive phase, so we're watching that very closely, and what that is if the river gets below 1,500 cubic feet per second for 5 consecutive days, that would kick us into the next phase, which is restrictive. We put it on here for you as well, but the emergency phase would be the last phase, and obviously the most severe of them, and that's if the river levels have dropped below 1,000. So currently in drought warning, have been there since the 20th. I'd like to show you a little bit about what we've been monitoring. So this next slide talks specifically about those levels at the river that we've been watching very closely. Pat and I joke, and our spouses have made fun of us. It is the first thing we've been checking every morning and checking multiple times throughout the day to make sure we're staying on top of this. But as you can see, it ends up being an average at the end of the day of where the river is, and we have that displayed for you there in the middle column. So between July 20th and the 31st, we were in the drought warning phase, and the numbers really bounced between 1,500 and just below 2,000. I put a little bit more detail here. What you can see is what's been happening since August 1st. So we dropped to below that 1,500 mark on August 4th and actually had 3 days in a row below it, watching it very closely. Very timely rain this past weekend, which helped bump us back above that 1,500, which resets the day count. So again, we're looking for 5 days in a row, which we have not hit and are not below, as of today, still above that for now. But we have the potential to be below it today we know right away first thing tomorrow morning what today's numbers end up being. And for those of you wondering kind of how this compares in severity, how this drought compares to normal, I have the statistic there on the left, but there's about 90 years of data on the flows from the Mississippi River, and the average over the last 90 years for today's flow is 6,500, and usually between 6,000 and 7,000 this time of year. So being down around 1,500 just shows the severity of how big this drought is, and doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Last thing I'll mention from this slide is you can see if we do fall below 1,500 today, the soonest we would be entering the restricted phase would be Monday, August 16th. So the other data that we obviously need to monitor here closely, as I explained to start, is that our goal, because we are in the drought warning phase, is to be around that 50% above January levels. So January was 35.4, which puts our goal right now to be at 53.1 million gallons per day of what's being used within our system. So you can see that on July 21st, the day after we implemented the voluntary request, we were actually at 72% above January. As of today, all the way at the bottom, August 10th, so we have the data from yesterday, we were at 30.45. So in the last couple of days, thankfully due to the rain, but also I'd like to hope partially due to our customers kind of jumping on board, awareness spreading about the request about the voluntary odd even, as well as people just becoming more aware about the drought. It's getting a little less hot. We're starting to see our pumping numbers trend in the right direction. And as you can see, the 5-day rolling average as of today is yeah, right at about 30%, which is great. I've left it there on the bottom. So although that's good news, if we do hit the restrictive phase, which again, so the potential of hitting as soon as next Monday, we need that goal to be 25%. So it would still be work to do. And if we're being honest, the low numbers today and the last 2 days are greatly in part of the rain that we saw over the weekend. So moving along, I think I'll pass it back to Pat here to really talk about what we're here today to do and what next steps might look like.
All right, well, thank you, Raquel. So as we have the potential to move from the drought warning phase to the restrictive phase, just due diligence on our behalf to be prepared for that. It's not necessarily a when, but it is an if, but it certainly is possible or somewhat likely that we will hit the restrictive phase. So that 50% target will drop to 25%, which, as Raquel outlined, is right around 44 million gallons a day as our target to get to. And so that's where we are before you. We got authorization at the end of July from the Board of Water Commissioners to implement these tasks or these initiatives, restrictions, and through legal guidance, then an emergency ordinance by the respective city councils authorizing kind of the enforcement side of it. So we're at that point right now. We're asking for consideration to implement what I would call really soft enforcement measures, really trying to make sure people have the opportunity to understand what we're asking, and then kind of a soft touch working towards eventually a shut off after 5 violations. It's pretty likely at that point that the property owner or resident is blatantly trying to violate the ordinance at that point. So it seems somewhat likely at that point. The next, lost my screen there. So this is kind of an overview of what we're talking about kind of in picture form. What we're asking for tonight is approval to do a violation schedule as outlined here. So the first violation would really just be an educational notice. It's somewhat likely that people are unaware, busy living their lives, dealing with the uncertainty that life brings these days. So an educational notice, which we kind of personal interaction with the property owner, explaining the requirements, the need for the requirements. The second would be a written warning. It's certainly possible that one family member or housemate doesn't relay the message to someone, or if they're using an automatic irrigation system, that the programming didn't get quite worked out as well as they had planned. So a written warning, then a $50 fine, which would be included in their water bill. The fourth would be the $100 fine, and then the fifth would be a $150 fine, and then the water shut off. And the reason why we felt keeping the water shut off as part of that is at that point, before the water can be turned back on, they would have to pay the $50, the $100, and the $150 plus a $50 turn on fee. That way, really, at that point, then it becomes a monetary indicator that the person needs to take action. So as you see on the gauge that we're currently at the requested odd even, if we enter the restrictive phase, that dial would switch to the required odd even. And then if we're not seeing that progress over the course of 7 days, and we're still in the restrictive phase, then at that point we would consider a 1 day a week, which we would work with our suburban customers on what day a week, 1 day a week, how that would work. But what several others have suggested is a workable plan is using a person's garbage day to determine that 1 day a week. And then as we go to the orange and the red, those would be more as we enter kind of that emergency phase where really some statewide indicators of enforcement are put out, and hopefully very optimistic now with the seasons changing by the time we get past the state fair that at least for this year we won't be dealing with anything of that significance. So with that, I will stop presenting, and me and Raquel are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for the update, and I do want to just I chuckled out loud. I think my mute button was on when Raquel was talking about how the first thing that you do every day is check the water levels of the river, and that your spouses are laughing at you, and just want you to know that you're in good company. We're the nerds that show up at another city and we're like, I wonder how that got funded. Who's the person behind this transit line? Like you're like, you can't help but put I call my municipal goggles on and ask really inane questions that your travel mates wonder what you had for breakfast, kind of thing. So welcome to the club. Thanks for checking the water levels every morning. We appreciate that. I see Ms. Prince and Ms. Yang have hands up. So let's start with Ms. Prince.
And I'm sorry if I'm missing something. So right now we're in the requested odd even. So does the penalty phase kick in now, or when we're in the mandated odd even?
Thank you, Councilmember Prince. We are still in the voluntary phase, so this is just in preparation if we do hit that. And that's a great question. I think it's something that we really should clarify. At the very earliest, as Raquel laid out, we will hit the next phase at the earliest next Monday. And then in the ordinance, as presented, there's a 72-hour kind of waiting period to allow public education to happen. So there's no guarantee that we'll ever hit the mandated stage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for that clarifying question. I think we talked about it a little bit this morning too. It's similar in some ways to some of the other conversations we're having. We're just giving ourselves that authority and then hoping for rain. Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. One thing that I wanted to highlight was how so many of the water commissioners brought up the importance of making sure this information is communicated in multiple languages, knowing that we are a really diverse community here in St. Paul. Folks come from all sorts of backgrounds. And so, Director Strait, can you spend a bit of time just talking about like that communication plan out to the community as of now, and like especially if that dial does turn up as well?
Sure, Councilmember Yang. Yes, really immediately after our Board of Water Commissioners meeting, we have reached out to some staff and some interpreting services that we can get that information out. One suggestion from the Board of Water Commissioners too was to use images like the dial. You know, they explain a lot of information and they're easily translatable kind of just through people's ability to kind of use pictures to really understand where things are. But we certainly will reach out to you, Councilmember Yang, and take you up on your offer to help us with that too.
Great. Were there other questions on this topic? All right. Thank you very much, Raquel and Patrick. We appreciate the information. Oh, looks like Mr. Tolbert has a hand up.
Yeah, I don't have any further questions. I'll just say, and I'm probably repeating for those who are on this morning, but I think this is something. Obviously, we hope that we don't have to get to the next stage, and we don't get there. But I think this is reasonable, and at the end of the day, our goal is compliance, not punishment by any means. And we're asking people to be part of the solution to preserve our water here in St. Paul because we're facing those drought conditions. So thank you for being thoughtful about it, and I'm supportive of this.
Great. And thanks for underscoring that, Councilmember Tolbert. I think it's the key. The goal is compliance here. We're not trying to penalize people, but this is serious. The numbers, what they've displayed about the levels of the Mississippi River are shocking. The levels are low. I've heard people saying they've never seen it so low and so on. So I agree, underscoring the appreciation for the thoughtfulness here behind this work and the extended conversation we had at Water Board. So Ms. Yang would move approval. Any final discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The emergency ordinance is adopted. Item number 22 is ordinance 21-27, amending legislative code chapters 60, 63, 65, and 66 pertaining to off-street parking requirements.
All right, and this item is before us as a public hearing. We did get a staff report last week. I know Mr. Johnson is on the call, I believe. If we have questions or need a quick brush up on this item, there's a public hearing that we have held virtually, and we've had quite a bit of input that is in on our agenda in our Legistar system and available online if people like to check in and read that. I know my colleagues and I have seen plenty of emails come in and had a chance to look at that. So this is that, since we're not in the council chambers, it's that weird moment where this is a public hearing date, so not the date that we have our final vote. So certainly open the floor if people have comments today on public hearing. Otherwise, we can hold off until next week. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you, and thank you also for just acknowledging our current virtual state. I believe that this is the kind of item that would be packed out or have lots of friends of the policy here to testify, and I appreciate everyone in the pandemic sharing some numerous emails with our office and with all of us. So I wanted to speak a little bit today, and I'll probably reinforce some of this again next week, but I just think this proposal is a big enough deal that it is worth talking about it twice and then a lot afterward. It's really exciting to be on the verge of eliminating parking minimums in our city. And another reason why I just feel compelled to share about that this week is that just days ago, we got a pretty devastating international report on climate from the IPCC and the United Nations that is approved by over 190 governments and is basically saying the Earth is going to get hotter. We have lost time to mitigating climate crisis, but also it isn't too late to turn back on how hard it's going to be if we continue to take action and act dramatically to just reduce emissions in our communities. And that's exactly what this policy is going to do. So I just wanted to share some comments that constituents have shared as part of the public hearing that I personally really appreciated. One of my constituents wrote, requiring unneeded parking favors large chains and companies who can afford to build it, making it harder for small local businesses to compete. I think that that's a really important economic aspect, in addition to the climate aspects of having a healthy, vibrant economy with unique local businesses that we want to support. Another person shared, when we build parking spaces, we dedicate resources to housing cars and not people. And on average, mandatory parking adds $142 a month to a tenant's monthly rent. I found that statistic very striking. Another person wrote that these minimums make housing expensive and they force us to prioritize cars and the storage of them over our residents. And my favorite comment came from a constituent who wrote, literally, parking minimums, what are they good for? Absolutely nothing. And I am not talented enough to sing it in the way that they meant it, but I got a kick out of that one. So I continue to be inundated, and I am just really grateful. I'm grateful that this policy is so strongly supported by our community. And I think we received some reinforcement from one of the highest bodies of governments on our earth this week that this is something our local government can do. So I just wanted to share that enthusiasm and look forward to advancing the proposal and supporting it next week.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to, I'm a little bit afraid I'm turning into my grandpa, but who used to like repeat stories, but I just want to share just like kind of my parking minimums story in Ward 5 that has just blown my mind since the day I heard it. And that is, you know, in the south east corner of the North End, there's a neighborhood that's called Buffalo Ridge. There's a business that's been located there for more than 100 years, started out as a peddler's wagon and has turned into a larger business. And at one point they expanded to add another shift and needed to increase their parking capacity to accommodate their new employees because of parking minimums. And in spite of the company's protesting because it was a shift, they added not more workers during any one day point. They were required to add parking and bought land across the street from the building and made a parking lot. And the parking lot was vacant because there was no need for it because everyone could fit on the parking lot of the business. Eventually people said, wow, there's a parking lot there with nothing in it, and started dumping mattresses and tires and other trash and garbage in there. And of course, who gets the bill? The owner of that land. So after trying several techniques to limit the amount of dumping that was happening on that property, the property owner put a chain link fence around the parking lot. And so now today, on a fairly, high profile street, there's a parking lot with a chain link fence around it, nothing going on in the inside of it, no mattresses sitting there today, all because he had to meet those parking minimums in order to expand his business. And to me, that's just like, what is wrong with the policy as it currently exists? I am 150% supportive of this. I think that there's nuanced pieces that need to be addressed. How does this impact, neighborhoods where there's parking overlays? And I appreciate the answers that we got from Mr. Johnson on some of those questions. But just thinking about that business in the southeast corner of the North End and just the trials and tribulations that they've gone through, and really expenses to create an eyesore. Just is a great kind of metaphor for why we need to get rid of this. So that's my grandpa story for today that I wanted to get on the record, and take a drive down Cayuga if you want to see it for yourself. Any other thoughts on our public hearing date? All right, and as I mentioned, this is second reading, so we'll hear it again next week and have an opportunity to chime in again. But I appreciate the comments, and I would, we would move to lay the matter over for 1 week.
And close the public hearing.
And close the public hearing. From Ms. Jalali. Any discussion? Roll call.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Bredmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over to August 18th for third reading, final adoption. Item 23, ordinance 21-31, granting the application of St. Albans LLC to rezone property at 695 Grand from B2 Community Business District to T3 Traditional Neighborhood District, amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map and denying the rezoning out of the EG East Grand Avenue Overlay District.
All right, and this is in front of us for final reading and vote. Last week we held open or continued the public hearing to this week at the request of Councilmember Naker. So we have had a staff report on this item, I think at our first reading. And public hearing, our public testimony is inputted in our agenda and into the Legistar system. I know there were some calls today questioning if all the information was getting into Legistar, and I know that our staff is working diligently to make sure that all comments are captured. If they weren't there at 1, they're probably there now, but they're doing their best to be caught up with that inputting, and we all council members all have that access to look at those not only when they're inputted into our agenda and Legistar, but when they come in. So just wanted to assure people that we are seeing comments on this item, and the public hearing again was held open from last week till today, where we will close the public hearing and presumably have a final vote. So with that said, I look to you, Ms. Naker, with a hand up.
Thanks, Council President. And there was a lot to read and think about and analyze with this. So I want to thank my colleagues in advance for their indulgence while I talk a little bit at length about this particular proposal. So first, I just want to thank everyone for their hard work on this issue, to staff in our planning and economic development team, especially Emma Sigworth. I believe this was your first project or your first major project. What a project to be thrown into at the very beginning. Thank you for your diligence on this. To the Summit Hill Association Board, who has been wrestling thoughtfully with this development for months. To the Planning Commission and Zoning Committee members who were engaging in detailed, hours-long, thoughtful conversations about this development. I know because I listened to them, and I know the work it takes to get to delve into these issues and really engage with community and come to a decision that it takes a lot. And I deeply respect and appreciate the work that everyone has done to get to this point. And I also want to thank the developers who have conducted one of the most thorough and inclusive community processes that I have seen in a long time. So I'm going to comment first today on the proposed rezoning, which is the issue in front of us, and then just take a step back and talk about some of the larger issues that are related to zoning on Grand that have come out of this conversation. So first, for the rezoning application itself, I do believe that a rezoning is appropriate for this site. The current B2 zoning does not allow for mixed-use development, and Grand Avenue is clearly a mixed-use corridor with many successful examples of mixed-use buildings in the vicinity. But the question we need to ask ourselves today is, what is the best rezoning? And not the best rezoning for this particular building being proposed, but what's the best rezoning for this part of our city now and into the future? Because the rezoning will stay with the land, irrespective of what's developed on it. I've read the testimony we've received. I've consulted with staff, the city attorney's office, read the minutes of the zoning committee, watched the planning commission meetings, and based on what I've heard and read, I don't believe T3 zoning is appropriate for this site for a number of reasons. First, I think it's clear that T3 is not consistent with the way that this area has developed, as evidenced by the fact that there is no other T3 zoning on East Grand and very few buildings that come close to its height and massing limits. The closest T3 is Selby and Dale, which is several blocks to the north, and the only T3 on West Grand is at Snelling and Grand, which is obviously a significantly different type of intersection than Grand and St. Albans, very different density and transit environment on the A-Line, bus rapid transit, et cetera. Second, the land use chapter of our comp plan requires us to ensure that building massing, height, scale, and design transition to those permitted in adjoining districts. As Commissioner Riley pointed out in his eloquent argument at the zoning committee, there is no way that the massing, height, and scale permitted in a T3 district can transition to those permitted in adjoining districts as long as the East Grand Avenue Overlay District is in effect, because that district limits heights to 20 feet lower than the T3 district allows. And even without the overlay district, it would be difficult to see how the proposed building could transition to the existing adjacent buildings, which are 18 feet, 19 feet, and 29 feet shorter, respectively. Third, and finally, the rezoning is clearly in conflict with the District 16 neighborhood plan, which expressly limits T3 level heights and massing in the overlay district. The staff report acknowledges this inconsistency, which is the basis for not allowing the parcel to be zoned out of the overlay district. I also want to acknowledge that there are many ways in which the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the neighborhood plan, and those were discussed at length in the staff report, in the Summit Hill Association letter, and in the discussions at Planning Committee and Planning Commission and Zoning Committee. But, and I think this is the key point, all of those benefits, mixed use development, added density, promotion of local retail, additional housing, et cetera, can also be realized with a different rezoning. And that is, in my mind, the appropriate rezoning, which is to T2. As the staff report points out, T2 has the same design standards as T3. It allows for the same mixed use development, and T2 is also explicitly referenced in the overlay district. There have already been several successful rezonings to T2 along this part of Grand. The major difference between T2 and T3 is the height of the building, which is clearly the reason why T2 was called out as consistent with the overlay while T3 was not. I want to be clear that I think that this project is an extremely valuable project for the neighborhood. I completely agree with those who have written in and who have called in and who've emailed in support of the additional housing, especially the larger housing to allow seniors to age in place, the support of local retail and treasured local businesses that are there, and street vitality. And I would very much like to see this project come back to us with a request for rezoning to T2 and with a design that more appropriately transitions to its neighbors. I understand that this will involve some trade-offs in open space, structured parking, and public space, and I recognize that we may need to be willing to make those trade-offs in order to allow for development under the very tight restrictions of the overlay district. And now I want to talk about the overlay district. Because throughout this process, I have heard repeatedly from neighbors who say they support increased density along Grand, but not at this scale. But if indeed we want greater density along Grand, we need to seriously question whether the East Grand Avenue Overlay District is right for our community. Since the district was put in place 15 years ago, there have been 33 new mixed-use buildings that have been constructed in the city of St. Paul. Not one of them was constructed on Grand. It's not intellectually honest to say that we desire greater density, but maintain zoning that makes it impossible in practice to build to that density. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we revise the neighborhood plan. So I would invite those who have been active in this conversation to also be active in the broader conversation about the neighborhood plan and the overlay district, which will be taking place between now and June. I plan to engage in that conversation actively and to ensure that the community and the neighborhood has whatever resources it needs to have an informed and inclusive discussion about that plan and the zoning. And in closing, I promise this is in closing, I just want to say one word about not the content of this conversation, but the way in which it has taken place. I have seen that, like many discussions of development in our city recently, this one has involved very strong feelings on all sides, and that is entirely legitimate. Also, however, like many discussions of development recently, some have taken this conversation as an opportunity to launch personal attacks against others and to question the integrity of city staff, fellow neighbors, and me. I understand that the trend in our country and our world right now is to debase our public discourse in this way, but I think in St. Paul we can do a lot better than this. And I would ask my fellow residents to please consider that everyone working on these projects and everyone living in our neighborhood is working extremely hard, doing the best they can, and everyone wants the best for our city, even if we differ as to what that best looks like. So thank you again to my colleagues for indulging me, and I am eager to hear your thoughts.
Ms. Naker, before we take the mic, I just was wondering if you, just to clarify, there's a lot of information that you just shared with us, and I heard you mentioning an alternative of it, as a lesser, an upzoning, but a lesser upzoning. Are you proposing a different level of zoning? Are you asking for the developer or PED to come back to us with that other request?
So thanks, Council President. I didn't make a motion. I just wanted to kind of open up the discussion. My understanding, and I would defer to our city attorney, is that I cannot suggest a new zoning right now, that we have to either approve or reject the proposed zoning. But I was trying to state what I believe to be a potential path forward.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and just wanted to clarify. I realize you didn't make a motion, but just I'd heard some things thrown out there, and perhaps staff can answer this question. And thank you for hanging on, Ms. Jalali. But perhaps staff can answer this question: if one were to go back to the drawing board to consider T2 zoning, what does that process look like, and how long does it take?
Thank you, Council President Brenmoen and council members. So from my understanding is that it would go through the same process as it has been. So it'll go through, they will do a new application, and then it'll go to zoning committee, and they will make a recommendation to the planning commission, and then it'll go to planning commission, and then they will make a recommendation to city council. So so I guess overall, probably, another month or so till it gets back to you.
And is there, when you do something like this where you've engaged a community, had conversations about various, where we've already dug into this issue, does that help facilitate its path through the zoning committee, planning commission, and on its trip back to the council, or is that basically right back to square one? I realize it's a new application, but it's retreaded, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, Council President Brenwan. So it's my understanding that, the Planning Commission is really familiar with this case. They've talked about it at length, through the course of 4 meetings, if they're on the zoning committee also. So, definitely shorter presentations. And I believe the Summit Hill Association would also weigh in on this. They provided their recommendation, but they would probably weigh in on the T2 standing. They did recommend approval for the T3, so I would assume that they would approve the T2. And then, so yep, I think that it would be a little bit more condensed, in terms of the meetings, but discussion would probably be just as great. I was just looking at a chat from Director Pereira, and he was saying the new process for T2 would take about 60 to 120 days. I think that's including, the city council process too.
Okay, and I'm asking just as if it's a, if it's an option that we're asking folks to explore, if we're talking about another year. I mean, I know with development, every month is crucial. So understanding that you're talking about, 2 to 4 months is good to know. All right, Ms. Jalali, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. And this is, I am happy to wait because there's a lot to talk through and it's important. So I guess I would like to fully support moving the project forward today. It's my understanding Councilwoman Nicker is going to move to deny the item, and I would like to move to approve it, or I would vote against that motion. I want to talk about the bigger picture of commercial corridors like these in our city and how we're embracing mixed use development in our neighborhoods. I appreciate Councilwoman Naker that you have been very supportive of that along Grand. I especially appreciate you just interrogating the relevance and usefulness of overlay districts. I have overlay districts in parts of my ward, and many of them are historically used to give wealthier and more highly educated and politically empowered groups of constituents more tools to block things that actually lower wealth, more diverse, and newer to our city residents need, like new businesses, like more affordable types of housing and a mix of housing, and just more room in our city for our population growth. And I just really want to support you in your efforts to revisit that as a factor in this situation, and have had to work on those issues in my own ward that predecessors have left behind for me. And it has created problems. It has impeded our ability to be equitable as a city, to house people, and to let there be fair processes citywide for what we're trying to create. And to me, this project is about advancing and embracing vitality on Grand Avenue and in our business ecosystem for local businesses that, since I was a councilwoman, have read so many articles and been listening to commentary about how this is one of the main kind of signature commercial corridors of our city. It has citywide significance. And also there's this narrative that businesses are dying. And I think that is worth interrogating because, first of all, people are still very happy to come to St. Paul and visit our businesses and support folks. But also the question of why they are is getting answered the wrong way. Why a lot of businesses are not succeeding is that we are not supporting the growth that is needed to help them have a local customer base and be able to just get people in the neighborhoods who are there to go to the businesses. We cannot rely on suburban people driving into the city to be the folks that spend money in the city. We are the capital city of Minnesota. We have beautiful commercial corridors with a range of unique local businesses. Grand Avenue is an amazing example of that. There are ethnic and immigrant owned businesses on Grand. There are local shop owners like my own constituents who own long-standing, unique places for folks to shop right there. And what they need to survive is more people. And when I think about the question raised, which is what should the new zoning be? To me, the idea that the only reason that we would use to not advance the proposal as is, which is very supported by the district council, was almost unanimously supported by the planning commission and has been discussed and deliberated at length and is consistent with comprehensive plans and other area plans for the neighborhood, is that it's just a little too much for some people. And I don't actually find that sufficient as a way to do land use. I don't think that's appropriate. And I recognize that there could be a path forward, but that path forward is, to me, very uncertain. And I actually think that the project as we have it is here right now, and we have the chance to not only move it forward, but to keep the door open, in that it's my understanding that the Planning Commission recommended that we change the underlying zoning, but deny the second request, which is to also be taken out of the overlay district. But by having the variance option, I think that that allows us to continue having something to keep advocating for constituents with as leverage and in negotiations with the developer going forward. And I find that useful and a pretty reasonable compromise that was supported 16-2 at planning. And so, knowing all these things, I just don't think that the benefits outweigh the preponderance of the evidence that we have, and I would like to see this project advance today. So if the motion is to deny the rezoning, I would be voting no, and I will work hard to support development at this site no matter what happens. I think it's important for climate, it's important for sustaining growth, and I know, Councilman Naker, you've engaged in this very thoughtfully, and you are holding a lot of those things as well, and that you are also guiding that vision on Grand, and I want to support that effort as much as I can. So that's what I would have to say about what we have before us today, and I also would like to hear other thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. And I guess I would just say that there has been no motion at this time. So we're discussing, and so when it comes time, we can look at it in the affirmative or the negative, depending on who wants to move it. But you had made a point, and I wanted to ask a question. The last part of the comments that you made were basically in support of going to T3, recognizing that what's in front of us are variants and cups and opportunities to reel things in based on the overlay and what that's ahead of us, but to clear the path to move forward under T3 as proposed. Is that what I heard you say, Ms. Jalali?
Sorry, are you asking for me to clarify?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard correctly.
If the motion is to deny the rezoning, like if the motion is to not allow the project to advance today as is, then I will vote no against that. And I believe that's what Councilman Naker had brought. So
yeah, my question was just at the last part of your statement was that I believe was just that there are, if we move forward with T3, that there are still cups and variances that will come before us and an opportunity for us to continue to weigh in on the conversation. But that is what I just wanted to make sure that I heard. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for the clarification. Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Councilmember Naker, I want to say thank you for prepping all of the talking points that you did today. I think that it was really helpful to hear, and also to hear Councilmember Jalali's points too. I would say for me, I don't support the rezoning, and one of the biggest reasons why is, as I think about development in our city, I think that the relationship between like the decision we have to make today and also like who housing is built for is really important to have. And I feel like so much of the time that is something that is left out of the conversation, because we basically just have to take things at a face value. And I don't believe that that's the case at all. I think that for us, like we have a duty to think about who we want to build the city for, and also recognizing the fact that there are actually so many families who are struggling and wanting to find housing but can't afford it, and to know that this proposal actually does not meet folks where they're at is definitely one of the things that weighs so heavily in my heart, and one that I am centering as I'm sharing with you all these things today. And so I won't be able to support the rezoning. I definitely hope that the developer will come back with something else at the table that really incorporates all of the things that were shared, not only by us at the table here, but also by constituents in Ward 2 and also across the city who always share their vision around housing and what it looks like for us to be a community together.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Ms. Naker, did you have a hand up?
Thanks, Council President. I did, and I do have a comment, but I want to hold back and just let others of my colleagues speak first.
I don't see hands. Am I missing somebody? I don't see it. Oh, Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President Brenmon. I am grateful to Councilmember Naker for her painstaking analysis of this. This is a tough question. The amount of support and opposition is really overwhelming. I can't think of a time recently where we've gotten this much feedback about a development. But I agree with your assessment that this is not a TN zone. I believe that given our 2040 comp plan, which you'll recall we just recently passed, so it's not like we're operating off an old comp plan, doesn't identify this as an urban village or a high volume transit corridor, which would call for T3. I also found very compelling Commissioner Riley's analysis of this, and I share his view, and I think yours, if I heard you correctly, that TN could be achieved here. TN2, a project of similar to this could be achieved here with TN2. And I believe also because of the favorable floor area ratio that you get when you go to T2. So I will leave it at that, but I want to say that I also really appreciate your analysis of how much opposition we direct at each other, when I firmly believe, having worked with Councilmember Benenov in 10 years, where we were able to bring communities together and create solutions when there is marked opposition. I really believe that it's cities, it's neighbors who build community, not developers. I think we need to bring the community together and come up with a way of getting something similar to this built. I really appreciate Councilmember Yang's point about who can live there. I think it just, again, brings up the urgent need that we have to be doing inclusionary zoning so that everyone can live everywhere. But I am going to support, well, I guess we don't have a motion yet. I will not be voting to rezone the property.
Sorry, I feel like I'm asking a lot of clarifying questions here. This is it's obviously a complex matter, but we're looking at rezoning today. So to the question of affordability or what is the proposal, if we're looking further down the road at variances and cups, is that an opportunity for the council in partnership with our ARP dollars or, perhaps the county's ARP dollars to request increased affordability, or is that just not part of the plan here? Ms. Naker or Ms. Prince? Seems like that's a little ahead of us, but
my understanding of it would be that we can, I suppose that we can seek voluntary affordability with a density bonus, but we have not passed that policy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that could come down the line. The other thing I'll say about if the rezoning is to pass today, I think there are some significant problems with the variance and the conditional use permit coming forward, because the developer has been completely unequivocal that he needs the variance for financial reasons. And the Minnesota Supreme Court has been really clear in land use cases that that the conditions for allowing a zoning variance do not include economic considerations. So I didn't see a path to get at it that way.
All right, thank you. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President, and thanks, Councilmember Prince. I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree with that. And I wanted to, first of all, thank everyone for this conversation so far. Thank Councilmember Jalali in particular for your comments. And I want to reiterate again that I am both in favor of this project and in favor of density. And I have taken multiple votes on this council to try to promote a more dense environment. I think that is absolutely the way forward for our city. And yet we have not only responsibility when doing rezonings to do it according to the law, but also we have a range of zoning in our city from which we can choose when we're doing a rezoning, right? So even if we want to increase density overall in the city, we don't rezone our entire city to T4 or to B5, our most intense zoning uses, because we recognize that different zones fit appropriately in different neighborhoods, and all of our neighborhoods have different feels, different characters, and different types. So I think the fact that we have a number of different zones and a range, especially within the T district from T1 to T4, means that we should be trying to really fit the proposed area to the zone. And I also want to recognize that density doesn't just come in one form. The tallest possible building, the biggest possible building. There are many, many cities where density is achieved through missing middle housing, through 3-story and 4-story, brownstones on every block. And I think there's a lot of potential to achieve a great deal of density with upzoning, even within T2 and other zones.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I have also just been listening along, and I would just add in some thoughts about colleagues who've raised points about affordability, which I appreciate. And I think it is right to be raising that as we talk about every new project and also what our citywide policies are. And I would just offer a couple of thoughts on that point, that the difference between this development happening now versus before is that we are actually poised to bring forward new policies in our city that, if they coincide and time out with a project like this one, could improve the affordability, and we could still vote to advance it today and also work on that going forward versus kicking everything back to the drawing board. And that's things like the 30% AMI fund that the administration is exploring under the American Rescue Plan, which would have the potential to be a difference maker to help families of all sizes and backgrounds and people, not just families, but individuals who want to live in our city and don't have families yet also need housing and are a big part of our housing market. And working individuals who don't make a lot of income for most market rate projects, but could get into a place like this one, could be benefited by that. And then where our inclusionary zoning ordinance process times out with this one, there is a decent chance that we could be able to support a project like this one if we continue in the conversation and work to address that quickly. It feels overdue and sad that we don't have that in place already, because I think that would ease and mitigate a lot of the intensity about affordability with projects proposed like this one, projects proposed like the one at Lexington, projects proposed that get heard in my ward all the time that will be important for the Allianz Field site. All of that is citywide and going to keep happening. So I would simply, I would offer that because we have possible avenues of recourse there and can continue advancing with some leverage to do that, I think supporting it today helps us do that. It doesn't take away the chance. And I worry that actually denying the rezoning means that we actually have to start over, or that it would mean we get a building that is smaller, which would just satisfy how people feel about how big a building looks. But it does not make it more easy to have a building be more affordable, because you have fewer units to work with. You have less ability to leverage if some of the units can help pay for the others. There's different tools that you can use to increase affordability in a bigger building that will go away if we make it smaller. And that's actually what this conversation is about when we talk about the size and scale of the zoning. So I want to add that in there because I think it's important. And that's all I wanted to add. I've already kind of said my piece, but I appreciate people's attention to this project. And I especially do appreciate Councilman Naker, you sharing about the vitriol that has come up. I agree with you that I hope this discussion is illuminating. We can talk about these things in a sensible, policy-based, values-based way, and also without bringing forth kind of the worst of our characters. So I appreciate the chance to talk through that here. Thanks.
I appreciate that as well. I'm really struggling with this item. I'm consistently voted, as Ms. Naker said, for density, for development, and for creating opportunities for denser, more walkable communities. And I think that there's a lot to this project that is something that I would consistently support. I have some concerns about the points that you've raised about the overlay districts and the legalities around moving forward with the zoning with the overlay district in place. So I'm kind of wrestling with that a little bit, and almost to the point where I would consider requesting a layover just to get a little bit of deeper understanding, because some of this is, I'm not as intimately involved with that particular overlay district, but I do truly appreciate Ms. Jalali's points about overlay districts and the chilling effect they have on the density that people in those very areas say they are for. And so we do need to take a deeper look at that. But I personally would like to understand better. I know that people are eager to vote on this, but I would also toss out into the ring that perhaps just a little bit more time to think that through would be helpful for me. Because I, at face value with what I'm aware of, I think that we have the tools in our tool chest to continue to move forward with this project with is upzoning to T3, but then to look at some of the considerations that have been brought up here as we move forward into cups and variances. And so it's, I'm just struggling with that, the last layer that Ms. Naker pointed out today. And I do really want to thank you for your diligence in looking through all of this, as it is complex and it's high visibility. And I see Mr. Tao has a hand up. I think I saw Mr. Tolbert as well. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Councilman Becker. I know that this is a really important project in your ward, and for the city of St. Paul, it's got a lot of press on it. And my experience in our ward, Ward 1, is we got some really good development, the Vintage, the Ryan development along Selby and Snelling, and other parts of Ward 1. And so this is, I think this is a big deal for Grand Avenue. We've seen that over the past couple of years, for various reasons, there are shops that are leaving Grand Avenue, there are shops that are coming in, and density always has a positive economic effect on it. So, but I would appreciate, along with Council President, if I would support a 1 week layover to comb through everything again, and considering all the conversation that and all the really important points we have today from Councilmember Jalali as well, and Yang and all the other council members. I would appreciate a 1 week layover as well to look through all the evidence and the legality of it all too.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that. I appreciate that as well. And appreciate knowing I'm not the only one who's continues to have some questions based on the nuances here. Okay, I'm looking, are there other comments at this time? Mr. Tolbert?
Yeah, I think the idea to do a 1 week layover, I would be supportive of that too. A question for the city attorney, are we running out of time on a clock? I know on some of these we have clocks that just want to ensure that we're not.
There is a letter attached with a 60-day extension putting this out to October, but I want staff to verify that you have time. There should be plenty of time for a 1 week layover.
That was our city attorney's office speaking. Is there anyone who wants to, she looked like she was, Ms. Palmer looked like she was looking for a verification, but it sounds like we do have time.
Yes, Council President Brenmoen, that is true.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's
I think
very important question. Thank you.
I think that would make sense. And, you know, I think maybe a little more information on the overlay district presentation on what something getting rid of that could look like. I agree with Councilmember Naker and Councilmember Jalali that it's problematic and has, I think, had negative effects on Grand Avenue, that overlay district. But I'm sure there's people who disagree with that. So I would be supportive of a 1 week layover, and then maybe we could discuss more some of the different implications that we've discussed today.
Yeah, and just on that note, just also an opportunity to get a little bit more clarification of what coming back with a project under a T2 would look like. And I think that the questions that Ms. Jalali brought about, you know, less density means less affordability. And so what does that actually mean if our goal is adding affordable? So some of those questions we can dig into as well. So I'm looking to you, Ms. Naker. It sounds like there's some support around dragging this out one more week to just allow folks a chance to look into some of the things that have been discussed here today. And I'm looking to you to see if that is a motion that you would bring forth, or if you'd like me to do that.
Thanks, Council President. No, I had my hand up ready to do that. I appreciate it. As I think I've shared with all of you, I think this is an incredibly complex issue. And while I know I've been able to take the time and really delve in, I want to make sure everyone has had the time to do that. And I think there are really important issues at stake here. So yes, I would absolutely support a 1 week. I will move a 1 week layover to give everyone time to think through this. I also think to the question about timing, I would also like to encourage, and this has been a very complicated issue. I have not until this point been having private conversations about this project because of the variances in the CUP that are coming, which are quasi-judicial. And I'm not sure what our legal responsibilities will be about the zoning between now and next week, but I guess I would say I would encourage staff certainly to have conversations with the applicant about that 60 days to 120 days. I would certainly like to see on the other side of 60 days towards the 0 days in terms of how much thought has been given to this project already. The intent here is not to halt this or to slow things down forever. It's merely to put in what I think is the appropriate zoning and that I think we can legally justify. I just want to say one more thing about the overlay district, because I heard some folks say in the next week or so we might get some more clarification on the overlay and what we can do with that. And I've been informed by city staff, and I'm pretty clear that there's not. The overlay district is in place. It is the law of the land. It is the zoning that takes precedence over all other zoning. There are 9 other zones along Grand, but the overlay district rules them all. And the way to change that overlay district would involve the neighborhood doing its new neighborhood plan, which it is doing. It has committed to completing that by June, and then bringing a recommendation to us. Currently, the call for the overlay district is in the neighborhood plan. So just wanted to be clear that we can learn a lot more about that in a week, but it's not going to be resolved or taken away in a week. So I would move a 1 week layover.
Yeah, and it's 1 week layover. It's just that, a 1 week layover. And I hope that it gives some of us an opportunity to delve into the issues that you've very diligently brought forth to us today. And again, I really do appreciate that work and the comments and conversation we've had here today. And I know this might be the 3rd or 4th time this is being said, but so in big wholehearted agreement about civil discourse and our ability to disagree and recognize that we're all moving forward together, and Long after a project is completed, long after an item is passed, we must continue to live together as neighbors. And sometimes in the middle of a battle, we lose sight of that, and it can be painful. So cheers, here. I appreciate all those words about civil discourse. It's important, and I appreciate this council maintains that as well. So there is a 1 week layover proposed by Ms. Naker. Is there any, Ms. Moore?
Just a question for clarification. Are you going to keep the public hearing open, or this vote include closing the public hearing and then stop adding the comments to the file?
That is
Close the public hearing,
yes,
and lay over for 1 week. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that very important clarification. So we are, so Ms. Naker is moving to close public hearing in that matter, and moving to lay the matter over for 1 week. If items are still in the queue, we'll put them obviously into the public or into our Legistar system, as I mentioned at the top of this meeting, but the public hearing process then will be closed after this vote. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang? Excuse me.
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Council President Brenmon?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed, and the ordinance is laid over to August 18th for final vote. Item 24 is Resolution Public Hearing 21-194, approving the application of Monster Series LLC for a sound level variance in order to present live amplified sound on August 28th at 180 Shepherd Road, Upward Landing Park, southwest corner.
All right, and this public hearing has been held virtually. Ms. Naker, is your hand up?
Yes, I don't have any problem with Monster Series LLC, and I don't think this is going to be a controversial item, but I just wanted to say that I did ask staff, because I got a couple questions, not about this item, but about some of the other sound level variances, about given the spread of COVID-19, as we discussed earlier, in the Delta variant, just what measures are being put in place to ensure that these events are safe. And I really appreciate DSI and the city attorney's office turning around a memo in record time that I believe is attached to this item, but it applies. I'm actually not seeing it attached to this item. Sherry, do you know if it's here on the next item?
It should be.
It's a memo that outlines the procedures that that events are following and the ways in which we're monitoring public health during this time with large events. So maybe it can be attached as we talk, but I thought that would be helpful for people to know.
It is. I'll republish it again. Perhaps you had opened up the agenda before the republishing before it had happened, because I did it right before the meeting started.
Thank you.
All right, so the public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Council President Brenmon?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 25, Resolution Public Hearing 21-195, approving the application of Twin Cities Jazz Festival for a sound level variance in order to present live amplified sound on September 17th and 18th at 221 5th Street East, Mears Park.
And this public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Naker would move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion? Roll call.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince? Councilmember Prince, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, sorry. Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Council President Brenmon?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 26, Resolution Public Hearing 21-197, approving the application of Rice and Labrador Alliance for a sound level variance in order to present live amplified sound on August 14th at 1675 Rice Street.
I just have to stringently object to this. Ms. Naker gets all the fun events in her ward, and then the one that happens to be in mine, they gave to her as a sponsor. What the heck? Hey, I'm gonna have my party. So let's see, the Rice Larpenteur Alliance having a big party this weekend, and I would move to close a public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 27 is Resolution Public Hearing 21-206, amending the financing and spending plans in the fire department in the amount of $9,002.02 for the Minnesota Task Force 1 reimbursement from the city of Edina.
And speaking of getting all the fun, I am just not going to be the only one who ever approves taking money from Edina. So I would say Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 28 is Resolution Public Hearing 21-208, authorizing the police department to enter into a grant agreement with the Office of National Drug Control Policy for the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program and amending the 2021 budget and activity budget.
All right, this public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Prince would move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion? Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Redmond.
Aye.
Councilmember Prince, can I just verify what you said?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. 7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 29, RLH BO 21-30, 1529 Adrian Street. Item 30, RLH BBR 21-45, 604 Asbury Street. Item 32, RLH BBR 21-44, 975 Marshall Avenue. Item 33, RLH BBR 21-47, 1717 Selby Avenue. And item 34, RLH BO 21-29, 1619 University Avenue West. And the motion is to adopt these items.
So moved by Ms. Jalali. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following item, no objection to the legislative hearing officer's amended recommendation was received, and therefore she recommends amendment and adoption of item 31, RLH RR 21-15, 655 Jessamine Avenue East. And again, the motion is to amend and adopt.
So moved by Ms. Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. And that is the end.
All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I'm gonna cover that part of my screen. So before we adjourn for the day, do folks have news from the ward or things that they'd like to share? I will say, since I started to talk about it a little bit earlier, that this weekend on Saturday from 11 to 3 is the Rice Larpenteur Alliance summer block party. And I know there's a million things to do in the summer, and especially a million things for council members to do in their own wards. But this is such a cool event. And again, with the three cities, Maplewood, Roseville, and St. Paul, working together on to create really a one neighborhood feeling, because folks who live up at that intersection don't much care which is their city they live in as much as what neighborhood they live in, and they want it to be a safe, walkable place where they can raise a family or go for a walk. And the work of the Rice Larpenteur Alliance, and a big hat tip to Kim O'Brien here, has really created some changes here. We should be hearing back about the Lamplighter Lounge soon. But if you have time to show up, this event offers food from Nepal, Korean food, Thai food, pizza, which apparently is not really from Italy, but and other amazing things to try out and to check out, and particularly just some of the investments our CVZ dollars have had on the area, particularly on improving parking lot, adding sidewalks and plantings, and it just is really becoming to be a transformed location. So encouraging folks, if they can buzz by, that they are welcome and invited, and come a little bit hungry. So it should be a really fun event. And yes, there's a sound level variance, which means there's going to be music. So hopefully we'll see you there. Otherwise, I'll bring some pictures next week. Ms. Nicker.
Thanks, Council President. I was so excited about the event that I wanted to sponsor the sound level variance. So I just wanted to let folks know this is actually an event that I can't attend, but just because I can't go doesn't mean I should spoil the fun for everyone else. And it sounds fantastic. So at Humboldt High School on the west side, there is an open house on Tuesday, August 17th from 9 to 11 a.m. It's a learning garden open house, so it's going to showcase the hard work and efforts of the Humboldt Learning Garden agriculture and marketing interns on their summer project, which consisted of developing and promoting school gardens. So I don't know if those are edible gardens or not, so there may or may not be food, and there isn't a sound level variance, but I think it's going to be fantastic to see the work of these young people and the beautiful new Humboldt High School. If you haven't yet seen it, it is a treat for the eyes. So try to go.
It's so true. Those transformations of the high schools have been amazing. Washington doesn't look the same. Como doesn't look the same. Humboldt doesn't look the same. They really have made those entrances and facilities much more user-friendly. They're changing the bathrooms to gender-neutral bathrooms, and just creating really wonderful spaces. And so it's a twofer if you can make it over to Humboldt. Any other news from the wards before we adjourn today? All right. Seeing none. Seeing nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you, folks.